Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Debe Islamic Association's Ramadan reminders. We continue this year to focus on faith versus disbelief, the first major section of Surah Baqarah, chapter 2, the chapter of the cow. We have completed the last Ruku or last section, which comprises ayahs 285 and 286. So today, we shall be looking at a review of this section. Since we are now in the days of emancipation from the hellfire, the last 10 days of Ramadan, let us recite the recommended dua for this time. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma ajirni minan nar. O Allah, save me from the fire of hell. Let's now begin by looking at the review of the last section of Surah Baqarah, which is also the last section of our major theme, faith versus disbelief. This was covered in the last two ayahs of Surah Baqarah, ayahs 285 and 286. So you can pause the video here and go and do the multiple choice test yourself. It's only 10 questions. And come back and join us and look at the solutions that we have. So let's look at number 1. It is a practice that when one is burying a Muslim, the first 5 verses of Surah Baqarah is recited at the head of the body, and the last 2 verses are recited at the feet. This is because this represents the recitation of the entire of the surah. That's correct. The first 5 verses are pertaining to the believers, and that is also correct. The last 2 verses are pertaining to faith, so we'd like to maintain that connection of belief and faith to the deceased. So since all 3 answers are correct, put all of the above. Let's go on to number 2. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and some other people have believed in what was revealed to him. So we're specifically speaking about in the first of the 2 ayahs, ayah 285. So who else believed with the Rasul in what was sent down to him from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Was it the Meccan people? Well, no, because some of them were unbelievers. Was it the Madani people, the people from Medina or Yathrib? And no, that's not so, because some of the people in Medina were hypocrites, and therefore they didn't believe in what was sent down. Was it those who have faith, the mu'min, or those who appear to have faith, the munafiq? So it was the mu'min, those who have faith. So let's go on to the third one. Muslims are allowed to believe in some of Allah's revealed books, and we know the names of 4 of them, right? However, we recognize that 3 of those may have been adjusted somewhat from what Allah has sent down. So are we allowed to believe in some of the books, such as the Quran, and not believe in the others? Right? That is not so. We must believe in all 4 of the books that were sent down. We just do not follow some of the books now because we know they may have been tainted. The message, that is. So let's go on to number 4. Muslims rank the messengers of Allah, the prophets, from most important to least important as follows. So if we have to rank them, should we say Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then Prophet Isa salam, Ibrahim, and then Adam? Is this the way of the most important, from the last prophet to the first? Is it the last prophet and then the second to last prophet? and then the first prophet and then Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, or is it another order? Where Muhammad comes first and then Ibrahim alayhi salam, Isa and then Adam, or no distinction is supposed to be made between the messengers. And in this first ayah 285, it says, La nufariku bayna ahadim min rasuli. There is to be no distinction to be made between the messengers. So we are not allowed to rank messengers in terms of which one is more important than the other. They all brought the same message at different times throughout history and to different civilizations. Number 5, every individual gets the same amount of burden, the same tests and trials. And is that true or is it false? Now let's recall there's a difference between equal or equity versus equality. So when we speak about individuals, they get different resources, and they have different skill set given to them by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As such, their tests or burdens will be different for each person. So let's look at the question. Every individual gets the same amount of burden or the same tests and same trials? No, that's not so. Let's go on to number 6. An abrogated verse or naskh from the Holy Quran. And let's consider an example of that. Over the 23 years in which the Quran was revealed slowly, sent from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through Angel Jibreel to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there were certain rules that were adjusted slowly over that period of time for the benefit of the people at that point. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his wisdom, for example, when he dealt with alcohol use, in the first case, the first ayah that dealt with alcohol use discouraged the use of alcohol. It said that there was some good in it, but there was more bad, and therefore we should stay away from it. Later on, when Prophet ﷺ went in Medina and lived there, there became a second revelation on that topic, where in this case, the prohibition now was limited. So it became a little more stern for the individuals and Islam at that point in time. And finally, those two verses were abrogated. One abrogated the other. And then a third verse came which abrogated the second one, which gave the ruling as is now. So the third verse, we repealed this ruling of the second one and replaced it by the full prohibition of alcohol and intoxicants on the whole. As such, the question remains, should verses which are naskh or which have been abrogated, their rulings, should it be removed from the Quran? And it should not, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down Angel Jibreel to the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the last Ramadan, where they recited the entire Quran twice to make sure that there was perfection in it. And all the verses, including the ones that were abrogated, were included. So therefore, they should be left in the Quran. Question, should the abrogated verses not be recited in prayer? And that's not so. When we're reading our Salah, we recite the verses of the Holy Quran, whether they're abrogated or not. Should the abrogated verses not be considered in making present-day decisions, or should the abrogated verses, it shows that Allah makes mistakes. And of course, Allah is perfect, and therefore he makes no mistakes. So what we're left with is this here. And why? So let's consider the ruling with the alcohol. If there are 3 rulings over different periods of time, if we're making a present-day decision on any matter, we should not be considering the first 2 verses or the first 2 rulings. We will only take the final one, not be considering the abrogated verse. So let me repeat it. An abrogated verse from the Holy Quran should not be considered in making present-day decisions. Let's go on to number 7. We're almost done. Believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not enough to grant a person heaven or Jannah. Is that true or false? So let's repeat. Believing in Allah is not enough. So let's give an example. The Makkans at that point in time, when Prophet Muhammad ﷺ started to give the revelation to them, all of them believed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was the creator. But over the influence of shaitan over a long period of time, many of them thought that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so even though they believed that Allah was the creator, many of them thought that Allah had daughters, which were the angels, and others thought that Allah needed help, so they had demigods, such as Lat and Manat and so forth, right? So believing in Allah, they did, but that is not enough to grant a person Jannah, because you can believe in Allah the Creator, but also be committing shirk. As such, believing in Allah is not enough. That's true. Let's go on to number 8. There's a hadith reported in Sahih Muslim. Whoever recites the last 2 ayahs of Surah Baqarah at night, it will suffice for him. So what does this mean? Does it mean he will not have to worry about food and sustenance, if Allah wills? Does it mean he will be contented or happy because of these 2 ayahs? Does it mean he will have enough of anything he wants? Or does it mean that he will be protected from the evil of that night, if Allah wills? And this is the best answer, which we've discussed before in the previous video. Penultimate question. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam received the last 2 ayahs of Surah Baqarah. When? On Miladun Nabi, on his birthday? Or was it on the Miraj, where he moved from Makkah to Medina across the land very swiftly? Or was it when he was on the Buraq, on the animal that carried this journey? Or was it when he went up into the heavens from Medina up to the 6th or 7th heaven by Sidratul Muntaha? And it was on the Isra, on that night journey. Remember, that night journey was broken up into 2 parts. Across the land was called the Miraj, and going upwards into the heavens was called the Isra. So when he was going up into the heavens is where he received the revelation of those 2 ayahs. Last question now. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam received 2 lights that no other prophet received. This is also a hadith reported in Sahih Muslim, which we discussed. And those 2 lights, they were what and what? Was it Surah Fatiha and Surah Baqarah? Surah Fatiha and the first 5 ayahs of Surah Baqarah, speaking about the believers. The first 5 ayahs and the last 2 ayahs of Surah Baqarah? Or is it Surah Fatiha and the last 2 ayahs of Surah Baqarah? So these 2 lights, as we discussed earlier on in that video, and you can take a look at that in part 8, was dealing with these. So now we're finished. We can go. We finish all of it, and we can start. So now we can view our response. And we got full marks, 10 out of 10. So all our answers were correct. We have now come to the end of the review of the 4th and last Ruku of the Surah. Here we discuss the last 2 ayahs of the Surah to help us recall the main points of this section. This brings us to the end of faith versus disbelief, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has presented it in this surah. We now end with the dua. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم. Our Lord, accept this service from us. Indeed, you are all hearing all knowing. Assalamu alaikum